Imagine doctors who look like monsters, children burning corpses for warmth, and mothers praying their blood isn't next. Europe around 1350. Not a nightmare, but reality. Even kings lock down their palaces, while outside the streets reek of death. Bodies exploded in the city streets, while rats gnawed through doors, and no one, music, dared to open a window after dark. Imagine this. The air in a throat is viscous. Music, tasting half of meat, half of sewage. Every street is saturated with leaking corpses. Some have been dead only a few hours. Music, others burst open under the pressure, splattering black matter and maggots everywhere. You see a foot sticking out of a barrel, being gnawed by rats. At night, no one thinks of opening a window. The air feels cursed. People scream when they hear cat sounds outside. Some throw stones at their own walls. Music, believing the plague is entering through cracks. In Paris and Venice, rumors spread that rats' music transmit evil spirits, so gangs roam the alleys, trampling them to death. But the corpses' music just pile up, humans and rats. Nothing could stop the decay. On hot days, bodies swelled until their bellies burst with a wet pop. Blood, pus, and half-digested bread splattered onto the cobblestones. Old ladies spat on their own hands before touching a doorknob, as if that would help. No one trusted anyone anymore. At sunset, windows were slammed shut so violently that the glass broke. Parents whispered to their children, "Don't answer, even if it's your uncle." You survive by music, staying silent, and hoping the rats get someone else tonight. So what happens when the disease doesn't just kill you, but eats you from the inside out? Swollen boils filled with pus grew to the size of apples. Music, the skin rotted, and neighbors begged executioners to end your agony. You wake up trembling and sweating. Your armpit throbs. By noon, a boil has formed there. Hard as stone, hot as coal, music, and it grows bigger by the hour. They call it a bubo, and when you cut it open, thick yellow pus oozes out, so foul that everyone retreats from the room. Sometimes it grows to the size of an apple and bursts like rotten fruit, spraying fever all over the floor. Doctors poke around, but no one can help. They try to cut off fingers and toes when the skin turns purple and rots, hoping to stop the spread. Mostly, only stumps remain. Surgeons pour hot oil into the wounds or cut open the swellings, hoping for a miracle. People scream, faint, or bite their tongues in pain. Some become desperate. They drag the sick into the street and call for the executioner. In Paris, witnesses report, men begged to be killed, and some executioners made their living solely from mercy killings. No one cared about the law. Anyone who had the buboes was a dead man anyway. Meanwhile, city officials began throwing all the infected, sick or alive, into pits. So what happens when no one can keep up with the corpses and the dead pile up faster than the living can dig? Before we continue, a small request. If you enjoy this content, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 99% of you watch the videos without subscribing. Imagine what we could achieve if everyone subscribed. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference for us. And if you have any hype left this week, please use it for this video. Done? Great. Thank you. Let's continue. Hearse wagons rolled around the clock. In the summer of 1348, in Florence, London, Paris, no matter where you looked, hearse wagons were part of the street traffic. Music. In every city, men were paid to walk through the alleys, knock on doors, and shout, "Bring out your dead!" They weren't priests or undertakers, just people hungry enough to haul corpses for a few copper coins. Sometimes music, the bodies still moved a little. It didn't matter. They went onto the wagon anyway. The piles grew until the wagons collapsed under the weight. In Avignon, the Pope had entire fields dug up and filled with thousands of corpses. In London, space ran out in the cemeteries. The stench, a chronicler wrote, could be smelled for miles. By the end of 1349, the death toll in places like Siena had risen so sharply, according to city archives, that construction of the famous cathedral was halted. Music. The workers were dead. The 4 men too. The stone blocks hung in the air. Grave trenches gurgled when it rained. Liquid death seeped back onto the streets. Horses collapsed under the load. When bodies fell out, no one bothered to pick them up. Rats gnawed through the piles. Dogs dragged away limbs. There was no time for mourning, funerals, or even tears, but the madness of this time reached a whole new level. Plague doctors stuffed their masks with herbs, while desperate city dwellers drank urine to protect themselves from infection. Do you want to know what madness looks like? Men dressed head to toe in waxed linen robes, gloves, wide-brimmed hats, and these long bird-beak masks that could be from a horror movie. These weren't costumes. They were the closest thing a doctor had in 1348. The beaks weren't just for show. People believed the plague spread through bad air. So they filled these masks with herbs, mint, cloves, lavender, even camphor balls. The doctors shuffled through the city, poking the bodies of the sick with long wooden sticks. No one came near them. No one touched a patient with bare hands. Some doctors had never studied medicine. They were gravediggers, barbers, music, or just people who had the courage to walk past a corpse. But it got even stranger. Old healers swore the best protection was to drink their own urine. Seriously, homemade medicine meant drinking urine, rubbing onions or crushed emeralds on the skin, and burning dried toads. Some tried to bleed out the poison with razor blades. Others sniffed vinegar music, or sat for hours in fumigation rooms. Meanwhile, city councillors offered bounties for every rat tail submitted, but no one managed to defeat the music plague. The more bizarre the cure, the more desperate people became. Starving crowds roasted music, plague corpses for food. Rats gnawed on infants, and priests declared God had abandoned humanity. In the most affected cities, Florence, London, Avignon, no food arrived anymore. Crops withered, bakeries closed, markets disappeared overnight. The few survivors wandered the streets searching for something edible. A loaf of bread cost more than a human life. People began boiling shoe leather, scraping moss from trees, and roasting anything they could catch. Dogs, birds, even rats. In Milan, there are reports of families roasting music-plagued corpses over open fires because they had nothing else. Priests who caught them sometimes didn't even bother to stop them. They had seen too much. Rats took over the homes of the dead. When parents died in bed, music infants and young children were sometimes left behind in the house, trapped with the vermin. Chronicles report music, how people heard rats gnawing through wooden doors and then fighting over corpses in the dark. This isn't a medieval music rumor. It's what city officials recorded in their plague records. And then came the spiritual collapse. Churches stopped ringing bells for the dead. Priests abandoned their duties and refused to bury corpses or visit houses. The Pope in Avignon locked himself in a brick room and sat between two fires for months, afraid to breathe the outside air. The common people heard bishops and monks say plainly, "Music. God has turned away from us. What comes next when hope is dead?" Entire families' music were sealed in their homes with bricks, where they suffocated and rotted alive, so that the disease would be contained. As the plague entered its second year, fear was greater than the disease itself. If someone coughed or got a fever, neighbors ran to the authorities. The answer was always the same: quarantine, no questions asked. But quarantine in plague-ridden Europe meant total lockdown, sometimes brutally. City guards and masons appeared at dawn. They shouted warnings and then big problem and to mortar every window and door. In Venice and Genoa, according to records, over 600 houses were sealed in a single month. Entire families, parents, children, servants, even pets were trapped inside. No food, no water, only the stench of disease and the echo of desperate voices begging for air. Stone by stone, entire neighborhoods fell silent. Survivors remembered the sound of the first stone on the door, because it meant no one would come to save them. So when death lives in your house and outside your window music, what kind of violence does it drive people to? Children murdered strangers for bread. Mothers suffocated infected babies. And dogs fought over body parts in the gutters. At the height of the plague, all rules broke down. Food ran out everywhere. Music. Bakeries were raided. Grain markets set on fire. And anyone carrying bread was attacked in the street. There are actual court records of children stabbing neighbors for just a crust of bread and then eating it immediately. Meanwhile, mothers faced hellish decisions. In Milan, city chroniclers wrote that women suffocated newborns with plague boils, music, just to spare them days of agony. Sometimes, neighbors heard the crying stop and thanked music, God. Sometimes they reported the mothers for murder. Outside, dogs ruled the gutters. The city watch had orders to kill any animal caught gnawing on a corpse, but there were too many to shoot them all. In Paris, people told stories of dogs with human hands, or ears still hanging from their mouths. Everything that made a city civilized disappeared. Parents hid bread in toilets, prayed every morning that their children would return, and locked the doors to keep out both animals and desperate people. And just when you thought the horror couldn't get any worse, the witch hunts and torture began. The witch hunts escalated. Midwives, beggars, and even cats were burned alive for spreading evil vapors. In 1349, panic reached its peak. It started with a rumor. The plague hadn't just music happened, someone had to be behind it. Soudain, les voisins s'accusèrent mutuellement de sorcellerie et d'empoisonnement de puits. À Strasbourg, plus de 900 juifs furent brûlés en une journée. Les archives de la ville le confirment. Les gens pointaient du doigt tous ceux qui étaient différents. Les vieilles femmes, les sages-femmes, les lépreux, ou simplement quelqu'un qui les regardait de travers. Les chats et les chiens furent également accusés. À Londres, la ville ordonna en 1350 de tuer tous les chats, car on était convaincu qu'ils portaient des esprits malins en eux. Ironiquement, cela a éradiqué le principal ennemi des rats musiques, et la peste s'est aggravée. Si une sage-femme perdait 2 bébés en une semaine, les citadins la saisissaient, la menaient au bûcher et l'enflammaient eux-mêmes. À Bâle, plus de 200 femmes furent exécutées en seulement 6 mois. Cela ne se produisit pas seulement à la campagne. Même les prêtres attisèrent l'hystérie, blâmant les femmes pécheresses, les mendiants ou d'autres groupes marginalisés. Des chroniqueurs à Florence rapportèrent comment la foule traînait des hommes et des femmes dans les rues, les torturant en musique pour leur extorquer des aveux. Les gens avouaient seulement pour mettre fin aux tourments, même s'ils n'avaient rien à voir avec les décès musiques. Alors, que s'est-il passé lorsque la loi et l'ordre se sont effondrés? Les riches ne sont pas restés. Ils ont fui, laissant les malades derrière eux, et soudain, il y eut dans chaque ville une nouvelle sorte de dirigeants qui erraient dans les rues. Les villes ont perdu tout contrôle, les mères ont fui, et des bandes ont régné sur la nuit. Des registres de Sienne datant de 1348 montrent que les fonctionnaires de la ville ont fait leur bagage et se sont enfuis dès que les morts ont commencé à s'empiler. Le conseil municipal musique a simplement cessé ses réunions. À Paris, c'était pareil. En novembre, le roi et la plupart des nobles s'étaient réfugiés dans leur domaine, laissant les pauvres, sans rien musique, à l'intérieur des murs de la ville. Sans chef et sans police, les rues sont devenues incontrôlables. Chaque nuit, des bandes d'adolescents et d'hommes désespérés s'introduisaient dans les maisons, se disputaient la nourriture et pillaient les maisons qui sentaient la décomposition. Les riches ont utilisé leur argent pour survivre, mais leur méthode était tout aussi impitoyable. À Venise, des familles aisées ont payé musique des gardes en 1349 pour abattre quiconque avait l'air malade ou s'approchait de leur maison. Les gardes ne posaient pas de questions. Quiconque toussait musique mourait. Des chroniqueurs rapportent que certains hommes ont même muré vivant leurs serviteurs pour ne pas risquer que le souffle de la peste n'atteigne leur testament. Les marchands ont augmenté les prix du jour au lendemain. Cela signifiait que des familles entières mouraient de faim pendant que les boulangers faisaient fortune, puis fuyaient dans les montagnes dès que leurs propres enfants présentaient les premiers symptômes. Et lorsque les cimetières ont débordé, on a vu de quoi étaient capables les gens désespérés. Les survivants musiques fouillaient les fosses communes pour arracher des objets de valeur aux cadavres en décomposition et priaient pour que leur propre sang ne soit pas le prochain. À la fin de la première année de peste, il ne restait presque plus personne pour creuser des tombes, encore moins pour les garder. À Avignon, Paris et Londres, les corps étaient empilés dans des fosses communes, parfois des centaines dans une seule tranchée, les membres emmêlés. Les fossoyeurs n'étaient plus payés en pièces, car cela n'avait plus de sens. La plupart des gens leur donnaient simplement des anneaux musiques ou des restes de pain. Ceux qui avaient l'estomac solide et pas de honte pouvaient rapidement devenir riches. Les survivants attendaient que les charrettes de la peste roulent au crépuscule. Puis, ils se faufilaient jusqu'aux tombes fraîches et tiraient les cadavres par les chevilles. Des anneaux d'or étaient retirés des doigts noircis et des dents étaient arrachées avec des couteaux pour accéder au plombage en argent. Des témoins oculaires ont rapporté des femmes qui déchiraient les vêtements des morts avec des bâtons, fourrant de l'argent, des broches et même des bottes dans leur tablier, puis rentraient chez elles en courant. Il y avait tellement de pilleurs de tombes à Florence qu'en 1349, des bandes se disputaient les meilleurs sites funéraires. Des chroniqueurs ont rapporté des combats à coups de poing sur les cadavres. Lors d'une bagarre, 3 hommes furent jetés vivants dans la fosse et laissés à la mort avec les cadavres qu'ils avaient tenté de voler. C'était désespéré et laid, musique, mais pour les survivants, rien ne comptait plus qu'un autre repas ou la possibilité de payer musique un guérisseur pour un traitement bidon. La superstition s'est répandue selon laquelle on pouvait échapper à la peste, en portant l'amulette d'un mort, ou en ayant un os d'un cadavre porte-bonheur sur soi. Lorsque la peste fut enfin passée, il ne resta plus un monde qui ne serait plus jamais le même. Les villes étaient silencieuses, les églises se taisaient musique, et les gens craignaient plus les uns les autres que la mort elle-même. L'épidémie a disparu, mais son ombre musique est restée pour toujours. Si vous avez aimé la vidéo, veuillez nous laisser un like, vous abonner à la chaîne et activer la cloche pour ne manquer aucune autre vidéo. Merci beaucoup et à bientôt. Monsieur